The courtroom was heavy with tension, a thick, uncomfortable silence settling in as the judge's gavel struck the wooden desk with a resounding crack. All eyes turned to the teenager sitting quietly at the defense table, her hands folded neatly before her. She was a small figure, nearly swallowed by an oversized suit, her face composed and calm, almost unsettlingly so for someone on the brink of public humiliation. Judge Mitchell cast a sharp, dismissive glance her way, his lips curling into a slight sneer. "Is this some kind of joke?" he muttered, his voice loud enough to ripple through the room. Adjusting his glasses, he turned his piercing gaze to the teen and smirked. "You're telling me this is your lawyer?" Her name was Claire Dawson, a name that carried no weight in the legal world. To those in the courtroom, she was just another wide-eyed kid, hopelessly out of her depth amidst the towering legal giants. They'd all been waiting for hours, only to see this young girl walk in and announce she would be defending the accused in a high-profile fraud case. The murmurs grew louder. Was this some kind of cruel prank? But Claire didn't flinch. She locked eyes with the judge, her expression betraying nothing, as if she were somewhere far away. What no one knew was that Claire had been preparing for this very moment her entire life. It wasn't a question of if she'd win. It was a question of how. No one in that room could have guessed what she was truly capable of. The prosecutor, a seasoned attorney with decades of courtroom experience, stood tall and unshaken. Her sharp suit and sharper gaze cut through the air like a knife as she glared at Claire. "This trial is not a game, young lady," she warned, her voice dripping with disdain. What was Claire thinking? Despite the overwhelming odds against her, she didn't appear rattled. Not in the slightest. To her, it seemed more like a casual conversation than a life-altering legal battle. What could drive someone so young, so seemingly out of place, to take on a challenge like this? What was her plan? The judge was already mocking her. The prosecutor looked down on her with professional superiority, and the clock was ticking toward the trial's pivotal moments. Every passing second felt like the countdown to inevitable disaster. Yet, Claire appeared calmer than anyone else in the room. Would she crumble under the pressure? Or was there something more to this unassuming teenager than anyone could imagine? Claire had always been different. While other teens spent their days at the mall or chatting about trends, she buried herself in libraries, dissecting case studies and immersing herself in criminal law. Her obsession with legal strategy began as an escape from a troubled home life. Growing up in a single-parent household where money was always tight, Claire watched her mother, a once promising lawyer, fall from grace. Years of self-doubt eventually led her mother to leave the legal world entirely. But Claire wasn't going to let that happen to her. She couldn't. The injustice of her mother's downfall lit a fire within her. Yet, it wasn't just ambition that drove Claire, it was brilliance. And while no one saw it yet, she was ready to show them. As the trial began, Claire stood at the defense table, facing the prosecutor for the first time. The weight of the courtroom pressed down on her shoulders, but she didn't waver. As the prosecutor launched into her opening statement, Claire's mind raced, dissecting every word, every fact, and every possible angle of attack. This was her moment to lose. Then it happened. The judge, his patience wearing thin, slammed his gavel once more. "Enough with the games," he barked, his voice booming. "I'm ordering a recess. If you don't bring a real attorney here, this case will be dismissed." Something shifted in Claire. Her heart pounded, but her mind was laser-focused. It was now or never. Rising to her feet, she shocked everyone by walking confidently to the front of the room. Without a word, she gestured for the prosecutor to sit, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. The room held its breath as she spoke. "Your Honor," Claire began, her voice steady, measured, and commanding, "I am the attorney in this case, and I will prove that I am more than capable of defending my client." The courtroom fell deathly silent. The confidence Claire exuded seemed almost absurd to the seasoned professionals around her. The prosecutor, the judge, and the other attorneys dismissed her with condescending glances, sure this was nothing more than a desperate, last-ditch effort. But Claire didn't need their belief. She only needed her own. As the trial unfolded, Claire's sharp intellect and strategic thinking began to shine. She meticulously dismantled the prosecution's case, piece by piece, exposing contradictions and overlooked details in their evidence. Her questions left even the most experienced attorneys stumbling for answers. Slowly, the tide started to turn. But the stakes were higher than anyone realized. Claire knew there were forces working behind the scenes, people who would stop at nothing to silence her. This case wasn't just about her client's innocence. It was a battle against a much larger system of corruption. Now, more than ever, Claire needed to stay one step ahead. The case reached a dramatic turning point when Claire uncovered a critical piece of evidence, a hidden email buried under layers of deception. This single document revealed a direct connection between the prosecutor and the corporation being sued. It was a bombshell that could blow the entire trial wide open. If Claire presented this evidence, it would expose the prosecutor as complicit in the fraud, but it was a massive gamble. She knew there would be no going back. Standing in the middle of the courtroom, the evidence in her hand, she felt the weight of every decision she'd made. The judge stared at her, impatiently waiting for her next move. The pressure mounted as the prosecutor, now visibly rattled, lashed out in frustration. The judge's growing hostility made the situation even more volatile. Claire's client, an innocent man on the verge of being wrongfully sentenced, was counting on her. But the risks were greater than she'd ever imagined. Then came the unthinkable. Claire received a private message, thinly veiled threats targeting her mother. The people behind this case weren't just after her. They were going after everything she held dear. For the first time, doubt crept into Claire's mind. Was she making the right choice? Was her pursuit of justice worth the danger it brought to her loved ones? She had come so far, but with everything on the line, could she really see this through? The trial's climax arrived with the courtroom on edge. Heart-pounding but mind-resolute, Claire stood before the jury, clutching the damning evidence. She turned to the judge, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm not backing down," she declared. "I'm going to show you the truth." And with that, Claire began to unravel the prosecution's case. She exposed the corruption, manipulation, and lies, piece by painstaking piece. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief as Claire shattered every argument the prosecution had built. Finally, the jury delivered their verdict, not guilty. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of shock and awe. Claire had done the impossible. She had won.